Her co-stars have ranged from Elvis Presley to Alan Bates, 5 Golden Globe Awards, and she's been nominated for 2 Academy Awards.
They called her the female Elvis, but in 1972, they weren't sure she'd ever perform again. After a devastating 22-foot fall that shattered her face, doctors said her career was over. 10 weeks later, she shocked the world by returning to stage and unleashed a performance so powerful it crashed NBC's phone lines. Here's how a shy girl from Sweden became the woman who left America breathless. Ann-Margret was born on April 28, 1941, in a tiny village called Valsjöbyn in Sweden. It was a quiet place with only 150 people, most of them farmers or lumberjacks. Her father had already lived in America for a while before coming back to Sweden to marry her mother, Anna. After Ann-Margret was born, her father wanted to move back to America, but World War II delayed their plans. Finally, in 1946, when Ann-Margret was 5 years old, the family left Sweden for good. They arrived in New York on November 29, 1946, and soon settled in Fox Lake, Illinois, where some relatives already lived. For Ann-Margret, everything felt new and strange. She didn't know any English, which made it hard to fit in. But even at that young age, she was determined. She worked hard to learn the language, and it didn't take long before she started doing well in school. Even as a little girl, Ann-Margret loved dancing. She started dancing when she was just 3 years old back in Sweden. After moving to America, dance became her way to express herself and feel more confident. Her parents supported her, even though they didn't have much money. Her mom sewed her dance costumes by hand, making sure Ann-Margret could follow her passion. She took lessons at a local dance school, where everyone noticed how naturally talented she was. She could pick up dance steps quickly and perform them beautifully. As she grew older, she started appearing on local TV shows, showing off her skills and getting a taste of the entertainment world. In 1959, Ann-Margret went to Northwestern University to study speech. She wanted to keep learning while also improving her performance skills. But during her first year, something big happened. She joined a jazz band called the Subtletones with 3 male classmates. They performed at school events and local places, and Ann-Margret loved every moment of it. One night, a talent scout saw her perform and was impressed. This was a turning point. After finishing her freshman year, Ann-Margret decided to leave college and go on tour with the Subtletones. They performed all over the Midwest and West Coast, eventually ending up in Las Vegas. Las Vegas changed everything for Ann-Margret. While performing at the Dunes Hotel, she caught the attention of George Burns, a famous Hollywood actor and producer. He saw something special in her and gave her a chance to perform at the Sahara Hotel for 10 nights. She wowed the audience, and the reviews were amazing. Ann-Margret's rise to stardom began with a screen test in January 1961 that changed her life. She was only 19 years old and had come to the U.S. from Sweden when she was 6. At the time, she was doing small performances in nightclubs, but this was her big chance to be in Hollywood. Instead of acting out a serious scene like most people, she decided to sing and dance to the song Bill Bailey, "Won't You Please Come Home?" She wore a tight black dress, her red hair flying as she danced. Her strong voice and energy amazed the people watching. In just a few minutes, she impressed them so much that the head of the studio gave her a 7-year contract right away. This was rare for someone so new. What's amazing is that this almost didn't happen because she was sick with the flu and had to ask for the test to be delayed. That bit of luck completely changed her life. A few months later, Ann-Margret was on TV for the first time on the Jack Benny program. Millions of people saw her on October 29, 1961. She was only supposed to sing one song, but Jack Benny loved her so much during practice that he insisted she do more. The producers didn't like this idea, but Jack Benny argued with them and won. Ann-Margret was very nervous before going on and almost passed out from fear. Jack Benny gave her a pep talk, and she managed to give a great performance. The next day, She got 437 fan letters, which was incredible for someone so new. One of the people watching was George Burns, a famous entertainer. He wasn't planning to watch, but caught her by chance while flipping channels. He later gave her a job in Las Vegas, which made her even more famous. In 1963, Ann-Margret became a movie star with Bye Bye Birdie. At first, she wasn't supposed to play the role of Kim McAfee. The part was meant for someone younger and less bold. Other actresses turned it down, and the director, George Sidney, suggested Ann-Margret. Not everyone was happy with this choice. Some co-stars worried she would steal the show. When the filming began, her opening song was supposed to be short, but the director loved her performance so much that he made it into a full 3-minute number. This decision cost a lot of money and took 2 days to film, but it was worth it. Another moment in the movie, where she sang "How Lovely to Be a Woman," surprised people because she performed it in a bold, flirty way. Some people thought it should be cut, but the director kept it. These moments helped make her a star. Around this time, the media began calling her the female Elvis. The nickname came after a columnist saw her perform in Las Vegas and noted her electrifying stage presence. The comparisons to Elvis Presley were uncanny. Both came from humble beginnings, both loved music and fast cars, and both had breakthrough moments in 1956. The connection deepened when Ann-Margret starred with Elvis in Viva Las Vegas in 1964. Their chemistry on screen was magical, and people couldn't stop talking about it. She was 22, and Elvis was 28, both at the height of their charm. The director, George Sidney, saw how special their connection was and gave Ann-Margret equal time on screen with Elvis. This upset Elvis's manager, Colonel Tom Parker, who wanted Elvis to get all the attention. Behind the scenes, things weren't always smooth. The director gave Ann-Margret more close-ups and better shots, which made Elvis's team angry. Colonel Parker even got some of their songs removed from the film. Despite these problems, their dance scenes, like "Come On Everybody," were so full of energy and passion that they became unforgettable. The movie's main song, "Viva Las Vegas," later became one of Elvis's most famous tracks, even though it wasn't a big hit when it first came out. Their on-screen romance turned into a real-life affair. They fell for each other during filming in 1963, but it didn't last long. Elvis ended things in 1964 because he had promised to marry his girlfriend, Priscilla Beaulieu. Ann-Margret later confirmed they had a strong connection, and even Priscilla admitted feeling hurt and jealous during that time. But Elvis never forgot Ann-Margret. Even after their breakup, he sent her guitar-shaped flowers every time she performed in Las Vegas. He kept this tradition until the day before he died in 1977, showing how much she still meant to him. The affair caused some professional problems. Colonel Parker didn't want them to work together again, so he made sure they didn't. But Ann-Margret's career continued to grow. People believed her time with Elvis gave her more confidence to take on new challenges. After Viva Las Vegas, Ann-Margret wanted to prove she wasn't just a pretty face. In 1965, she acted in The Cincinnati Kid, where she played a clever and seductive woman named Melba. She worked with big stars like Steve McQueen, and her performance showed she could handle serious roles. Then, in 1966, she did a fun comedy called The Swinger. In this movie, she pretended to be a wild party girl to sell her book. There was a famous scene where she covered herself in paint and used her body to paint on a canvas. It was bold and caught everyone's attention. The movie was a hit, even though some critics focused more on her looks than her acting. But it showed how versatile she was and also made her a fashion trendsetter of the 1960s. Ann-Margret became a serious actress with her role in Carnal Knowledge in 1971. She played Bobby, a woman who struggles deeply in a rocky relationship. Her acting was so powerful that it earned her an Oscar nomination for Best Supporting Actress. This was a big change for her because people had always seen her as a glamorous performer. But in this movie, she showed raw emotions. One scene stands out. Her character tries to take her own life after a terrible argument with Jack Nicholson's character. Ann-Margret later said she used her own struggles with depression and drinking to make her performance feel real. Audiences were shocked and moved by how honest her acting was. She took big risks for the role. Ann-Margret gained 15 pounds, even though she was famous for her looks. She also insisted on doing her own stunts, like falling down a flight of stairs, which left her bruised and hurt. There was even a scene where she appeared topless, which caused controversy at the time. But this bold choice made history. It helped movies show real, complex emotions about relationships and sexuality in a way they hadn't before. In 1975, she starred in the movie Tommy, based on The Who's rock opera. She played the Acid Queen, and one scene was especially memorable. She rolled around in baked beans, chocolate, and champagne, a wild, messy moment that took days to film. It left her with bruises, but it also earned her a second Oscar nomination. At the same time, she kept releasing music and performing live. She even sang with the famous opera star Luciano Pavarotti. Her shows were full of energy and daring stunts, like riding a motorcycle onto the stage, showing her fearless personality. In her personal life, Ann-Margret married actor Roger Smith in 1967. Their wedding was simple and unusual, held in a smoky Las Vegas room. She cried through the whole ceremony, and people thought she might be pregnant, but she wasn't. Roger made a big sacrifice for their marriage. He gave up his acting career to become her manager. He helped her pay off debts and find better roles, like the one in Carnal Knowledge. Their partnership was strong, even when life got tough. At just 26, Ann-Margret made her first big splash in Las Vegas on June 15, 1967, at the Riviera Hotel. This was a huge moment for her. She knew this performance could either take her career to the next level or hurt her reputation. The show was called Ann-Margret and Her Las Vegas Review. It lasted 90 minutes and showed everything she could do: sing, dance, and entertain like no one else. Big stars like Frank Sinatra, Dean Martin, and Sammy Davis Jr. came to watch, adding to the pressure. Ann-Margret made a dramatic entrance by sliding down a 20-foot pole, something that became her signature move. The night had a sweet surprise, too. Backstage, Ann-Margret found a giant guitar-shaped flower arrangement. It was from Elvis Presley, her close friend and former co-star. He wrote a note saying, "Good luck on your opening night. I'll be there in spirit." This became a tradition. Elvis sent flowers for all her Vegas openings. Her first show was a big hit, making over $400,000 in 1 week, which broke records for the Riviera. Critics loved her, calling her a dynamo of talent and sex appeal. This was just the beginning of her legendary Vegas career. Ann-Margret didn't become the Queen of Vegas overnight. Through the 1970s, her performances got bigger, and so did her crowds. By 1975, she was the highest-paid performer in Vegas, earning $400,000 a week at the Las Vegas Hilton. But not everything went smoothly. In 1972, she had a horrible accident during a show at the Sahara Hotel. She fell 22 feet from a platform and broke her arm, jaw, and cheekbone. The injuries were so bad that doctors thought she might never perform again. But just 10 weeks later, Ann-Margret proved them wrong. She returned to the stage with her arm in a cast and performed like nothing could stop her. The crowd loved her so much they gave her a 5-minute standing ovation. This comeback made her fans love her even more. Her shows became famous for being exciting and full of surprises. In one act, she rode a motorcycle onto the stage, showing off her love for bikes. In another, she performed on a huge spinning platform, singing and dancing while it turned faster and faster. She even brought a Bengal tiger named Raja onto the stage in 1976, adding danger and thrill to her act. Ann-Margret didn't just stay on stage, though. She often went into the audience, sang to fans, and even brought some on stage to dance with her. This made her shows feel personal, even when they were huge productions. One of the most touching parts of her Vegas story was her friendship with Elvis. He never missed a chance to support her, sending flowers every time she had a big opening. The last flowers came on August 15, 1977, the day before he passed away. Ann-Margret kept those flowers for years because they meant so much to her. Their friendship was special, and they always supported each other's careers. In 1972, Ann-Margret's life took a shocking turn during a performance in Lake Tahoe. She was 31 years old and at the top of her career. As part of her act, she was supposed to come down from a 22-foot-high platform onto the stage. But something went wrong. The platform became unstable, and she fell all the way down to the stage. The fall was terrible. Her face hit hard, breaking her cheekbone and jawbone. Her left arm was also broken, and her knee was badly cut, leaving a deep, messy wound. Ann-Margret was rushed to the hospital and fell into a coma for 3 days. When she woke up, her face was so swollen that she was unrecognizable. Many bones in her face were either broken or fractured. Doctors weren't sure if she would ever perform again or even survive. To fix her injuries, she had to go through difficult facial surgery. Her jaw was wired shut, and she could only have liquid food. Recovery was slow and painful. For 10 weeks, she focused on healing, unable to work or do much of anything. But Ann-Margret wasn't ready to give up. Just 10 weeks after the accident, she shocked everyone by returning to the stage. Her recovery was amazing. The surgery had worked, and she had pushed through the pain to regain her strength. That comeback showed how strong she was, not just physically, but mentally. It became one of the most powerful moments of her career. People admired her courage, and it gave her a new appreciation for life. After this, things didn't get easier. Around the same time, she lost her father to cancer. The grief, combined with the trauma of her accident, led her to turn to alcohol to cope. Drinking felt like an escape, but it quickly became a problem. She sank into depression, and her career and personal life started to suffer. For years, she kept her struggles with alcohol private, hiding them from the public. In 1980, she finally decided to get help. She worked hard to get sober and later admitted, "You never really overcome it, but I dealt with it, and I'm always aware of it." Throughout all of this, Ann-Margret had someone who never left her side, her husband, Roger Smith. When she had her accident in 1972, Smith did everything to get to her. When no commercial flight was available, he took a plane himself to be by her side. He pushed doctors to try a new treatment, which helped reduce her facial scarring. During her battle with alcohol and depression, he stayed by her, encouraging her to recover. He wasn't just her husband, he became her manager, friend, and strongest supporter. Years later, the roles changed when Roger became ill. He was diagnosed with myasthenia gravis, a condition that made it hard for him to move. Ann-Margret became his caregiver, taking care of him with the same devotion he had shown her. She said this experience changed her, helping her grow stronger and more independent. Their marriage lasted 50 years, full of love and support, until Roger passed away in 2017. Ann-Margret's career changed completely when she starred in the rock opera Tommy in 1975. She played Nora Walker, a mother struggling with her son's strange life. This was not like anything she had done before. The role pushed her to her limits, and she gave everything she had. One scene, in particular, stood out. Nora breaks down emotionally in a bright white room. Suddenly, baked beans, chocolate, and soap suds pour all over her. Ann-Margret had to move around in the mess for 3 full minutes. It was not just uncomfortable, but dangerous. During the shoot, she accidentally cut her hand on a broken TV screen and needed 27 stitches. Filming stopped for a few days, but she came back and finished the scene. She also spent weeks practicing her singing for the movie, and her song "Smash the Mirror" became a favorite. When Tommy premiered at the Cannes Film Festival, people were amazed. Critics, who had once thought of Ann-Margret as just a pretty face, now praised her talent. One reviewer even said her performance was surprising and spectacular. Because of this movie, she was nominated for her second Oscar. She didn't win, but she did win a Golden Globe, and her acceptance speech became famous for being long and heartfelt. By this point, it was clear Ann-Margret was no longer just a sex kitten from the 1960s. She had become a serious actress. After Tommy, Ann-Margret chose her next roles carefully. In 1978, she acted alongside Anthony Hopkins in a thriller called Magic. The story was dark and intense, and her performance earned her even more respect. In the 1980s, she started acting in TV movies, where she took on very emotional and challenging roles. One of her most moving performances was in Who Will Love My Children, where she played a dying mother trying to find homes for her 10 kids. She won awards for this role, and it showed how deeply she could connect with an audience. She also starred as Blanche Dubois in A Streetcar Named Desire, another big moment in her career. In the 1990s, she switched between dramatic and light-hearted roles. She acted in Our Sons, a TV movie about mothers dealing with their sons' relationships during the AIDS crisis, which was very ahead of its time. She then became a fan favorite in Grumpy Old Men and its sequel. Even in her 50s, she charmed audiences with her energy and humor. These movies proved that age didn't slow her down. Ann-Margret never let herself be defined by one thing. In 1992, she posed for Playboy at 51 years old, showing she still had confidence and glamour. But she was also taking on serious roles. In The Last Producer, 1999, she played an aging actress dealing with her fading career and personal struggles. This role was raw and emotional, and people admired her courage for taking it on. Even in her 60s, Ann-Margret kept surprising everyone. In The Breakup, 2006, she played Jennifer Aniston's mother, and though her role was small, she made it unforgettable. Over her career, she acted in more than 50 movies and won many awards, including 5 Golden Globes and an Emmy. When Ann-Margret performed for American troops during the Vietnam War, it became one of the most unforgettable experiences of her life. In 1966, over 3,000 soldiers in Vietnam signed a petition asking her to come and perform. This deeply moved her, and she quickly decided to go. In just 3 months, she put together a small team, including 3 bandmates, Johnny Rivers, Mickey Jones, and Chuck Day, and began a 15-day USO tour. Her first tour in 1966 was small and tough. It started at USO Saigon, where 400 soldiers squeezed into a room meant for 200. The air was hot and heavy, but they were eager to see her. One special moment happened when she flew to the USS Yorktown aircraft carrier. From the helicopter, she saw sailors standing in formation on the deck, spelling out, "Hi, Annie." She loved that memory so much that a photo of it still hangs in her home. 2 years later, in 1968, she went back to Vietnam with Bob Hope's USO Christmas show. This tour was much bigger, with 80 entertainers and crew, including her husband. The performances drew massive crowds. In Saigon alone, more than 20,000 troops came to see the show. It was a difficult time for the soldiers, as it happened right after the Tet Offensive, one of the war's toughest battles. Her visit meant a lot to the troops who were worn out from the fighting. The tours were not glamorous at all. They were dangerous. In 1966, she performed twice a day in the Iron Triangle, a very unsafe area where gunfire could be heard nearby. The scariest moment came on a flight to Phu Bai. Her helicopter came under enemy fire. The soldiers on board immediately protected her, shielding her from the bullets. Looking back, she said she didn't feel scared because the troops made her feel safe. She called them "my guys." These experiences left a deep impression on Ann-Margret. She felt a strong connection to the veterans she entertained. For years, she received notes and photos from soldiers who had seen her perform. Many wrote to thank her for being there during such a hard time. She kept these notes and cherished them. She said performing for the troops wasn't about politics. It was about supporting the men and women who were serving. The tours also changed how people saw her. She was already a famous actress and singer, but putting herself in danger for the troops earned her respect far beyond Hollywood. People saw her as someone brave and caring, not just a glamorous star. On January 22, 1975, Ann-Margret appeared on The Tonight Show with Johnny Carson. She was 33 years old and one of the biggest stars of the time. She had just finished working on the rock opera Tommy, which would later earn her an Oscar nomination. She was also there to promote her TV special, Ann-Margret Olsen, which was airing the next night. After a quick chat with Johnny Carson, she went on stage to sing "I've Got the Music in Me." As the music started, she stood still with her head down. Then she slowly looked up at the camera with a spark in her eyes. The moment the beat hit, she came alive. Her voice was powerful, and she sang with so much energy it gave everyone chills. She danced across the stage like the music was a part of her. At one point, she dropped into a split and kept singing without missing a note. The audience couldn't believe it. The band played perfectly, matching her energy. The song was different from the original. Ann-Margret and her team had added new styles to it, like rock and soul, and even a touch of her Swedish roots. It sounded fresh and unique, and it showed how talented she was as a performer. When the song ended, the audience exploded into applause. They clapped and cheered for a full 47 seconds, longer than any other performance on The Tonight Show at that time. Some people stood up to applaud, which was rare for the show. Johnny Carson looked amazed. He even stood up to shake her hand and said, "I've never seen anything like that." The audience loved it. Johnny was so impressed that he asked her to stay longer and talk about her performance. She laughed and said, "When you've got the music in you, it just has to come out." The audience laughed with her. It became a phrase people remembered her by for years. After the show, the phone lines at NBC lit up. Viewers from all over the country called to say how much they loved her performance. So many people called that the system stopped working for a few minutes. That had never happened before on The Tonight Show. The performance changed her career. The next night, her TV special had over 37 million viewers, making it the most-watched variety show of the year. She got new movie offers and signed a big contract for a Las Vegas show. People now saw her not just as an actress, but also as an incredible singer and dancer. Even Pete Townshend of The Who noticed her performance, which helped her land her famous role in the movie Tommy. Her sparkling jumpsuit became a fashion trend, and her hairstyle was copied by women everywhere. The performance also changed how late-night shows handled music. They started putting more effort into staging and choreography to make performances bigger and better. Even today, her performance is remembered as one of the best ever on television. People still watch it online, amazed at her talent and energy. It was more than just a show. It was a moment that defined her as a true superstar.